All right, so in this podcast, we are going to talk about vital signs. What's normal? What's out of range? What does that mean exactly? How accurate are these ranges? So we're going to talk about a couple of things here. So we're going to go over pulse rate, blood pressure, respirations. Those are your basic vital signs. And then we'll talk about oxygen saturation and carbon dioxide levels a little bit too. Okay, I've talked about that before, but we'll touch on it again. Normal pulse rate for just any person sitting around is supposed to be about 60 to 100 beats per minute. So if you check your pulse, you find it right here on your carotid pulse right here. You can feel it there. If you press down hard enough near your thumb, that's your radial pulse. You get your brachial, it's hard to feel, but radial is pretty common. If you feel that, you should, if you count, let's say you could count for a whole minute and see what you get. That's how many beats per minute it is. I usually count for about 15 seconds and just times it by 4 when I'm taking vitals on somebody. But basically, below 60 is considered bradycardia. Above 100 is considered tachycardia, okay? And if you, let's say you do a lot of, that's normal ranges, but let's say you do a lot of cardio. If you do a lot of cardiovascular activity, like Lance Armstrong, for instance, his resting heart rate is usually around 35, so I'm told. And a lot of people that do a lot of cardio, it just tends to be around under 60 when they're resting. So it goes below. So if they were to be monitored on something, the machine would probably alert this patient's bradycardic. But for them, they're actually just so healthy and they make their heart rate go up a lot that when they're relaxing, it can really slow down. Okay, so that's not really unhealthy or abnormal for that particular person. So these ranges are just what they are. They're just averages amongst the population. But if you have someone that's abnormal, say they work out an abnormal amount, like a lot, then their vital sign is going to be different than your average person's. Okay, so a lot of people that do a lot of cardio are going to have a slower pulse rate. Of course, when you start exercising, your heart rate goes up. Your body is compensating. So you're creating a certain amount of, say, waste in your body. We'll go over this in respirations a little bit more in detail. You're creating a certain amount of waste in your body, and you're creating a certain demand to deliver nutrients in your body and move stuff around when you're just sedentary. So when you start moving, you create a higher demand, so your pulse rate goes up. Your heart compensates by saying, I'm going to increase my rate a little bit, so we're going to go up. Okay, blood pressure. Average is usually 120 over 80. 120 systolically, that's when your heart is pumping. So it's how hard the blood is pushing against the vessel wall, against the artery wall. And then the diastolic, the lower number, is how much pressure is pushing against it when the heart's not pumping, when it's just at rest in between beats. So whenever it beats, it pushes on the artery wall a little harder. That's your upper number. And then when you don't hear it anymore as you're listening, when that sound goes away, that's the lowest it was heard, is your diastolic. That's how much pressure is on the vessel wall when the heart is in between its beats or at rest. When you're working out, your blood pressure goes up. One of the ways it does this is actually by vasoconstriction. So it's almost like if you imagine a hose and water's coming out of the hose, you have the hose on. If you're to put a nozzle on the end of the hose, what happens to the water? Shoots out a lot further, right? Same with your vessels. If you squeeze them down a bit, the blood pumps through a lot harder and things can move a lot quicker. So your blood pressure increasing is to deliver more nutrients, to move things around better. It's a good thing if you're exercising. It's supposed to increase a little bit. I read in a book by Stuart McGill that when someone's squatting like 800 pounds, when they're doing a really heavy squat, if you measure the blood pressure under those circumstances, I think 250 is really high. Apparently these guys get up to 400 systolically. That's crazy to me. I couldn't believe that when I read that. So when you're pressing that hard and you're under that much pressure, your heart's really working, your systolic blood pressure can go up to over 400. I don't think I've ever seen over 80, and I worked in the ER for 5 years and on an ambulance for 5 years. So measuring that high that's intense. It makes me think of all kinds of other medical stuff, but we won't get too into that. The one thing, the worry with high blood pressure is every now and then you have a weakness in the vessel wall, right? You have a weak spot in the artery wall. So if your blood pressure is constantly high, constantly kicking on that weak spot, it can burst early and cause an aneurysm. If that aneurysm is, say, in your head, that's a stroke. So you don't want that. That's why a lot of doctors want you to keep your blood pressure low, because we all have these soft spots, weak spots, whatever, and so they don't want a vessel to burst unnecessarily. So they try to keep your blood pressure low. Exercising and good diet will help with that more than drugs. If you can avoid drugs, always exercise and right diet. But hypertension is when you start to get into above 120, 130, 140, it's like some mild hypertension. It's not too bad. 150, 160, consistently up there, your doctor might start to recommend, hey, you either have to start eating better and exercising, or I'm going to want to put you on a medication that lowers your blood pressure. If you're not willing to do it yourself, we'll give you a pill. Maybe you'll be willing enough to just take this pill every morning. Maybe that's enough. Not too much effort on your part. You don't have to go too far out of your way to accomplish that versus spending an hour at the gym or something. So maybe more people are willing to do that than they are taking care of yourself. I, of course, recommend taking care of yourself. But when your blood pressure, if it goes above that range, it's considered hypertension. If you can figure out what's causing it, that's called secondary hypertension, if my memory serves me right. And then primary hypertension is when it's just always high and they don't know why. You claim to be doing everything right, you don't smoke, you don't drink, you get a good night's sleep every night, and maybe it runs in your family. Then it's just considered hereditary. Primary hypertension, they don't know what's causing it, basically, and they just think it's just your body's just has high blood pressure, and so they'd recommend a medication at that point to get it to go down. But again, if we can avoid medications, do natural things to get it to go down, that's far better. If it's low, if it's really high, it can also cause headaches, too much pressure in your brain, too much pressure in your head. Yeah, if it's high because you're working out, that's a normal response. If it's just high because it's high, sometimes even medications can cause hypertension. Your doctor's going to want to find out what's causing that and get it back down. So that's hypertension, high blood pressure. When it's low, it's called hypotension, so it's too low. It can be low for a number of reasons. Maybe you vasodilated way too much, just like that hose analogy, and it just can't flow through. So if you over vasodilate, so say you take a vasodilator and your doctor doesn't know and they think you're having a heart attack and they give you another vasodilator, like that stuff goes on your tongue. I'll think of the name of it, it's slipping my mind right now. But if they give you a secondary one, they usually ask you, do you take any vasodilators? If you do, then they won't give you that medication. What is it called? Anyways, so because if they double it up, your vessels will get way too big. Blood will not be able to move through effectively. Your blood pressure will bottom out, and that could really be damaging to a person. It could be potentially fatal to a person. So you want to make sure you're always honest with your doctor about what you're taking, especially if they want to give you something to lower your blood pressure potentially. Nitro, that's what it's called. If they want to give you some nitro under your tongue, that lowers your blood pressure, especially in a cardiac event, like a heart attack. But if you are always working out and you're always doing a little cardio, you do a little weightlifting, you eat right, your blood pressure is probably going to be, and you sleep right, you sleep well, your blood pressure is probably going to be consistently a lot lower than a lot of people's. Maybe as low as 110 over 70. It might get down to that low just while you're resting, which is fine. If you work out a lot and you eat right, it should be that low for a lot of people. As you get older, it tends to also trend upward. I personally believe it doesn't just trend upward as you get older. Until you're really old, then it really starts to drop off and get pretty low. But I think it's your normal average person doesn't take care of themselves. So to say, as we get older, it's just normal for it to go up. Sure, if you're eating a poor diet like most people do, if you're not taking care of yourself like most people don't, you're not doing anything to monitor it, then yes, as you do poor things to your body, as decades go on, it's going to get worse and worse. That's just common sense. But it's considered to be normal for it to trend upward and get higher as you age. But a lot of people that get very old, you hit 80 years old, all of a sudden their blood pressure is consistently pretty low. Anyways, we'll get off of that topic for a second. But so if it goes too low, it's called hypotension, okay, low blood pressure. So you want it to stay within a good range, but again, based on your own level of fitness, that range is different for people, okay? Respirations, if I remember correctly, it's about 12 to 20, probably 14 to 20 a minute is considered normal. And if you are breathing slower than that, would be called, it's a weird word. Apnea is like breathing, and then brady, slow. Tachypnea is breathing too fast. So obviously when you are sitting around, not doing much of anything, you have a certain amount of oxygen in your blood and a certain amount of carbon dioxide. So your body is doing things that create carbon dioxide. You have oxygen that you're breathing in and you're breathing out carbon dioxide, right? And plants do the opposite of that. Anyways, so as you're just sitting around doing nothing, you have a certain amount. And as you begin to exercise, let's say that same person gets up and they start to exercise, their carbon dioxide is going to start to go up. They're doing things that are making their cells work more, so they're creating more waste. So then what does your brain do? Of course, it tells your mouth, hey, breathe in. It tells your lungs, take a deep breath and let's breathe faster, let's breathe deeper, let's breathe more, because it helps to circulate that carbon dioxide and get it out and get oxygen back in. But the two need to exchange. It's not like carbon dioxide is the bad guy. It's a waste product, sure. But as it comes out of the cell, like a muscle cell, it actually kicks the oxygen off of the heme, off of the red blood cell, and the oxygen can then go into the cell, and like the muscle cell, right? Any kind of cell that you have, any tissue cell. So those two need to be balanced out. There should be a certain level of carbon dioxide. Let's say this one's carbon dioxide, my right hand, and my left hand's oxygen. They should be kind of level-ish. And so as one begins to go up, you breathe faster to get more oxygen, right? Most people, just so you know, live here. Oxygen is up high, carbon dioxide is low. The exchange rate is only as high as the lower one. If your carbon dioxide was up here, oxygen was down here, the exchange rate is only as high as the lower one. So you should always work to have those two be as equal as possible. And a way you can tell if you have a good equal value there is by doing what's called a Bolt score, meaning you breathe in and you breathe out and you hold your breath out, you can plug your nose, hold your breath out and see how long you can go comfortably. I don't mean when you start breathing again, you're like comfortably, so that when you start breathing again, within 3 breaths, only through nasal breathing, no mouth breathing, within 3 breaths, you are back to normal breathing. You feel fine. You weren't starving for oxygen. Okay, so if you see how long you can hold your breath after you take a breath out and then you hold it, 10 to 15 seconds is not the greatest, but that's probably pretty common. Above 20 seconds is pretty good cardiac oxygen, carbon dioxide exchange, gives you good cardiovascular capacity, right? So if you go jog, you're a better athlete if you can go above 20. You're getting into the 30 and plus 40 range, you're really doing good. You've probably read Oxygen Advantage, fully understand it, and you have turned your body into something that has a great oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange rate and great levels where they're pretty even. It helps burn body fat too, by the way, which I believe I've mentioned before. If you're not doing anything, again, just to review, when you're not doing much of anything, your vitals are all what they are. Your body wants to stay balanced like that though. The second you start doing something and your carbon dioxide goes up, your body wants to breathe more to get oxygen and carbon dioxide to balance out again. But again, if this is your normal and this one's carbon dioxide, this one's oxygen. If your normal is oxygen is high and carbon dioxide's here, then the second your carbon dioxide goes up to here, your body wants to get back to this. The second your carbon dioxide goes up, even though it's almost equal, which is better, it's healthier, your body's used to this. Whatever your body is used to, it wants to fight to stay at its own homeostasis that you've created through maybe poor breathing pattern most of your life because you just didn't know about breathing patterns. I didn't know until not too long ago, and now I have a better oxygen, carbon dioxide, cardiac capacity because of my understanding of books like The Oxygen Advantage written by Patrick McEwen. Yeah, that's a little bit about vital signs. They'll all, again, go up when you start moving. They all go down when you relax. One little side note, just a tidbit of advice if you guys want to try this. We tend to think we don't have a whole lot of control over things like anxiety. We have a lot more control than we realize. What happens when someone gets anxious? Their pulse rate goes up, their blood pressure goes up, their respiration goes up. Can you do much about your pulse rate and your blood pressure by just sitting here thinking about it? No. Advanced yogis can, but for the rest of us, we cannot. Your respirations, however, they increase too. Can you control that? Absolutely, you can control that. When you start to go into one of these panic modes, you're having an anxiety attack and you start like thinking this and thinking that and you're going, and then what happens is your whole body, then now your heart rate's pounding. So that really, you can feel that. That's not a good feeling. Like something your body's saying something's wrong. Your vitals are responding saying, yeah, something's totally wrong. And it reinforces this thought pattern that something's wrong. And as your vitals go up out of control, your mind goes more out of control and you start thinking more anxious thoughts and it just compiles on itself. But you can control your respirations. So if you intentionally, I've worked in an ambulance and done this to people, you tell them like, hey, come on, we're gonna calm down, look at me, let's take a breath. Slow, deep breath out. And you explain to them as we're taking deep breaths, as you do this, you can't control your heart rate and your blood pressure, but you can control respirations. They all are tied together. So as you slow your respirations down, our heart rate starts to come down, our blood pressure starts to come down, our anxious thoughts start to subside. We realize everything's okay and that you're in control again. So you can control that. So it's very helpful that these things are all tied together and that you can control one of them at least, okay? Just a little extra information for you guys. Hopefully that's helpful for you or a friend one day if anyone needs it. What also happens when you get into one of these anxious thought patterns is you get what's called carpal pedal spasms. So again, your oxygen and carbon dioxide need to exchange, right? The carbon dioxide kicks the oxygen off the heme, off the red blood cell, and they exchange place. And then you can breathe out the carbon dioxide through your bloodstream, it goes out your lungs, and oxygen can go in. If you breathe too fast, we talked about increasing your respirations being a good thing when you're working out because you're creating more waste, and so your body wants to get rid of it. So you increase your respirations, increase your pulse rate. If you're not doing anything and you're just having anxiety and you start increasing your respirations, you are taking in lots of oxygen and getting rid of all your carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide's here, oxygen's here. This is optimal. Most people live here. But what happens when this happens? Your oxygen goes really high, your carbon dioxide goes low. Your ability to exchange is tanked, it's gone. You're full of oxygen and you have no carbon dioxide left, and it's not being made fast enough because you're not doing anything, any kind of exercise. It's not being made fast enough. You're just having a panic attack. And your body will start to cramp up. Your body won't start to function as well. So all of a sudden people's fingers do these weird things like this where they bend them backwards, they get stiff, they can't move them. And if they don't understand what's happening and they're having a panic attack, an anxiety attack, now they're really having one. Now they're really like, my hands are locking up, like what is happening to me? In the end, things like that aren't deadly. Because I worked in an ambulance, we would joke about this stuff after a while. What's going to happen to the person if nothing changes? They're going to pass out. Guess how anxious you are when you're asleep? You're not that anxious. So if you just go out, you pass out, you start breathing normal, your heart rate slows down, your breathing slows down, and you wake up. And hopefully you're not still in a panic attack. Because if you are, you'll start panicking again, and guess who's going to pass out again? Whoever's having a panic attack. But if you understand this beforehand, you understand you can control your breathing, you can control all that and slow your respirations down on your own before your body tanks and falls over and passes out, and which will again also slow your respirations, heart rate, and blood pressure. So good to learn how to control it. Good to read books like Oxygen Advantage, and it's also, like I mentioned, it's great to be interested in your own health. If your heart rate is consistently a little high, your blood pressure is consistently a little high, it's good to look into what kind of natural ways can I fix this? Because you could take a pill, but every pill, there's not a pill in the world, a medication in the world that doesn't have a side effect. That's one of the first things you learn in nursing school. Every medication has side effects. They're listed in the book. And it might fix one thing, but it's going to cause other stuff. So if you don't want that to happen, if you want to fix it yourself, that's always optimal. That's always the way to go. And it's a million times cheaper. And on top of that, honestly, going to the gym is fun. I have fun. I see a bunch of people there that I know. We'll chat as we're just working out. We have a good time. It's good to move your body. You feel alive. It's great. So that's definitely the route you should go to get your vital signs in check. And hopefully enough people do this one day and take care of themselves on their own that it forces the books to have to be rewritten and the values to change. I would love to see that in my lifetime. I would love to see enough people working out and being healthy to where now you can't call 55 bradycardia anymore. You can't call that a slow heart rate because that's average, because everybody works out, or the vast majority of people work out and exercise. So the average heart rate is brought down. That would be phenomenal to see. Anyways, till next time, happy working out. I will see you guys in a week. See ya.